Welcome into WarUp on the WPIAL. Greg Warnock, Jeff Upson with you here as we get set for AA WPIAL individual wrestling action, and AAA WPIAL sections are coming up as well this weekend. Individuals are hot and heavy, Jeff. Should be a lot of fun here this coming weekend.
Yeah, I mean this is it. We're into the sectional tournaments in AAA, and we're into the WPIAL tournament in AA. So I got to say, you were probably super pumped that sectionals came back, right? In AA, you were probably elated that they were back. Is that correct?
You know what? I didn't mind them this year, Jeff, and the reason is that the brackets actually had some kids in it. You know, in years past, I think the reason why I hated the sectional tournament, and I think you did too, was that there was no kids in it. It was literally like, they're taking 5 or 6 to the WPIAL tournament, and there was only 5 or 6 kids in the bracket.
Yeah, that was
Like,
that
what
was
was the point?
definitely one of our biggest complaints. Was now it's different because AA has
There's so
grown.
many schools.
Yeah, Double A's grown so much with the addition of some of those Triple A schools. So yeah, but I mean, some of the sections are clearly better than the others, in my opinion. I mean that's pretty obvious. But yeah, there was some good action here. I'm really looking forward to the Double A WPIAL tournament. I think there's going to be a lot of good weights. A couple of open weights. There's some that you would say are pretty heavily favored, but for the most part, there's a lot of competitive weights.
Well, let's break down each weight class for everybody listening in and watching in. They take the top 8 out of the WPIAL into the Southwest Regional Tournament. And when you look at sevens, Jeff Cam Baker of Burrell is the top seed. Antonio Bonai of Central Valley, the number 2. Bruce Anderchak of Quaker Valley, number 3. Bonai had the huge win last week, 13-0 major decision over Anderchak to win the championship and get that 2 seed. So could see the potential of a rematch there in the semifinals. Anthony Mucci of Darien, the 4, and Darius Simmons of Burgestown, the other section champion, is the number 5 seed. And Simmons has he's coming on hot. I mean, he's wrestled really well at the team WPIAL and state tournament for Burgestown, and he was the number 3 seed going in and ends up beating top seed Alex Medlin of Best Center 10-3. So Simmons coming on at the right time.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that quality of competition that he's getting. Having some of those matches that he got in Hershey, and throughout the WPIAL team tournament, I think that helps big time with Simmons. And I agree with you; he is coming on strong and at the right time. The situation at 107 for me is Cam Baker, right? He's dangerous. He pins a lot of people. He's had a lot of experience in the youth ranks, but so did Antonio Bonai. Younger brother of Ambrose. He has been very solid. We just haven't seen him up against some of the competition that we've seen Cam Baker up against. So not saying he's untested, but he's certainly maybe a little bit less polished than Cam Baker is because Cam has been to a lot of these tough tournaments. So I think that one's going to be a really good one. I think, Bonai is not going to have any problems on that bottom half. He beat Anderchak by major decision. He pinned him earlier this year. So, yeah, I don't think there's going to be any issues there for him. I think it's Cam Baker and Antonio Bonai all the way.
114 pounds top seed Parker Senapal of Burgestown. He ended up pinning number 2 seed Jordan Williams of Chartiers Houston in the section final in the first period and was up 4-1 in doing so. Another guy who's just been red hot. Julian Bertucci of Burrell, the number 3 seed. Nico Finella of Indiana, number 4. And these guys didn't even get a chance to wrestle because Finella ended up medical forfeiting to Bertucci. Do you like where it's seated that way, Jeff, as far as Bertucci 3 and Finella 4?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not upset with it at all. I think that's the right way to go. I don't, Finella, he didn't wrestle in the finals there. He had a chance to wrestle and win that. I know he's dealing with sort of a nagging injury that's been going on for a while, but to not wrestle Bertucci and be on the same side as Senapal, I mean, that's kind of the gamble. That's the risk you take, right, by not wrestling in the section final. So I'm not mad at it. Jordan Williams, the transfer from Hempfield High School out in District 3, has been wrestling well, but I really think Bertucci's going to give him a. I think that's going to be a good match there. Should that happen, keep an eye on Emmett Wolf from McGuffey. I think a lot of McGuffey, some of their younger guys have been coming on pretty strong. Not saying he's going to beat Parker Senapal, but he could come back in the consolation round. Parker Senapal, I think, is the question for me is how much of a gap can he create between the rest of the field? That's really the question, in my opinion. Is Parker's been so good for so long. Going back to that quality of competition that he's had with Burgettstown, going all the way to the state tournament, and all 3 days there at the state tournament. I'm curious to see if Parker Senapal can kind of widen the gap on the rest of the field.
Yeah, you look at the fact that he pinned number 2 seed Jordan Williams in the first period. I think that gap is pretty wide. I'm interested to see how he does with Finella, because obviously Nico Finella had a fantastic freshman year, and coming into this year, you thought he'd be someone who could really do some major damage here in AA. But I guess the question is, do you? I know you understand the Bertucci seed ahead of him, but do you like both of those guys being behind Jordan Williams?
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Williams is a returning state qualifier. I have no problem with that. He's a returning AAA state qualifier. I mean, his resume speaks for himself. Yeah, he's taken some losses this year, but I don't see how that's I don't see that as an issue. Being the fact that he's a returning state qualifier, that's going to automatically move you up a little bit.
Absolutely. And we'll see. It should be a good one here in the semifinals between he and Bertucci. 121, Lucas Barr of McGuffey. He's the top seed. He was actually the number 3 seed in the section, but knocked off Max Ivsick of Bentworth by major decision in the semis, and then he beat Sean Kane of Mount Pleasant in the finals by a 10-3 score. Kane beat top seed Seth Burns of West Green, so that section got turned upside down, but he gets the top seed over Jack Cazalis of Quaker Valley because of his fall over Cazalis earlier in the season. Cazalis is the number 2, Carter Putt of Indiana number 3, Sean Kane of Mount Pleasant number 4.
Yeah, I mean, that's not surprising, because you figured if Barr was going to win his section and Cazalis was going to win his section, they were going to go that way, because just of that head-to-head result. And that wasn't really a fluke either, that win that he had. It wasn't a weird situation where he got caught or anything like that. So, but Cazalis, I mean, he didn't really have a whole lot of competition in his section tournament, so it's hard to say where he's at. Lucas Barr, on the other hand, he definitely had a good sectional tournament, taking out Ivchik and also Burns, Sean Kane. Burns was the top seed there, so that kind of, like you said, got flipped around and flipped on its head a little bit. But yeah, this is another one where I'm looking at it and saying, okay, Cazalis is, even though he has that loss to Barr, he's still the guy, right? And I would say he's pretty much a heavy favorite on that bottom half. Carter Putt is good, but I don't know if he can hang with Jack Cazalis. And on the bottom half, Barr's, he's going to have to go through probably Ivchik again, maybe Climb from Derry, Sean Kane, or Julian Moore even. So I think we'll probably see a rematch there with Barr and Cazalis, but curious to see how it goes this time around.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because Barr's going to have to probably beat the 2 guys, Ivsick and Kane, again in order to get to that final. And Ivsick was seated ahead of him at the section tournament. So here we are just 1 week later. Now he's a 1 versus an 8 seed. But that just tells you, really there's a lot of parity here in this weight class and how close guys are. I do think Barr and Cazalis have distanced themselves a little bit. But 3 through 8 should be an interesting battle, right? Because at any given week, these guys are going to come in a different spot.
Yeah, I agree. Like you said with the parity, I mean, it's not necessarily the top 2. It's the rest of the guys that I'm excited to see. I think we could probably see it being flipped on its head again this weekend. You could easily see a guy like Seth Burns cause some issues, unlike this past weekend for him. So yeah, I agree. It's the rest of the field that and a lot of these weights I'm looking forward to seeing who are the guys that advance through, because it's often we know, all right, these guys are the top guys. It's that other, those other like 3 through 6 and 3 through 7, those guys that you really want to see where they're at.
Yeah, and you get guys who can get hot, right? I mean, we're talking about, you mentioned like a Julian Moore of Fort Cherry. He could easily get hot, win a couple of matches here, and make it into the top 6, let alone being in the top 8. And this is a guy who was, fifth place in the section a week ago. So
Right.
it definitely, you just need one guy to have a couple of really great matches, and all of a sudden they're advancing on to the next round, which really is what it's about, right? It's about advancing. Obviously, you want to win a title. You can't win a title, at least make sure you're advancing. 127 pounds, Chris Vargo of Bentworth, your top seed. Cooper Hornack of Burrell, your number 2 seed. That's going to be one of the highlight matches of the weekend at Chartiers Valley, and going to be super excited to see those two battle. But you look at the rest of the bracket, Jeff Dylan Slovic of Burgestown, number 3. Anthony Orlandini of Montour, number 4. Tyler Clark of Fraser, number 5.
Yeah, this is one of the deeper weight classes, right? I'm not saying it's the deepest, but it's certainly one of the deepest here in AA. When you have two guys like Chris Vargo and Cooper Hornack leading the charge, that's a pretty good start. But then you throw in guys like Tyler Clark, Joe Longai, Orlandini, and Slovic, and you have yourself a nice little bracket here. Again, like we just talked about, yeah, I think the top two are pretty set and solid with Vargo and Hornack. But that rest of the field, like Garrett Newman, keep an eye on him. I really like these young freshmen from McGuffey. They're a little bit more battle tested than most, and I'm excited to see where some of these guys end up. But like Tyler Clark, for example, I think he could have a nice run. He could end up being in the semifinals. So there's going to be a lot of interesting matchups that are going to happen in the quarters and semifinals. And then you go down to the consies. I think you're going to see a lot of good matches there as well. So, Hornack and Vargo should be a really good one. Those two have some history together, and it certainly should be one of the highlight matches.
Want to quickly mention as well, it is single elimination in those first matches. So double elimination starts in the round of 16. So guys wrestling in that first round, they need to make sure they win to get a double elimination shot. 133 pounds, Jameson Pocliembo of Mount Pleasant, your number 1 seed. Peter Chacon of Montour, number 2. Gavin Suika of Burgestown, number 3. Damon Michaels of Elizabeth Ford, number 4. That was a good Southern section. Pocliembo beats Suika in the finals 3-1. Suika beats Michaels 4-3 in the semifinals. So really a solid top 4 at this weight class here at 133, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of depth, 133 has a ton of it, right? And by pure numbers, I mean, when you have a state medalist who's seated 3rd, right? That shows you how deep this weight class is. The South section, as you mentioned, was absolutely nuts, right? Pocliembo proved himself as being that guy. For him to come out on top of that section was very impressive for him. Just a battler, he's just a grinder. Coach Zach Snyder has always talked about how tough he is, just on and off the mat, and just really nothing phases him. So not surprised to see that. But then you look at the top half as well. You have Carmody from Quaker Valley as well. Damon Michaels, a guy who's been to the state tournament previously. He's on the top half. And then you throw in Gavin Suika on the bottom, Dom Lindsay from Central Valley also on the bottom, and Chacon, who I've been really impressed with this year. As a senior, he's really wrestling like a senior. I'm excited to see if he can find himself maybe in, the semifinals and give him a chance against maybe Gavin Suika. That's a big-time matchup for him, and I think that could be a good stepping stone for him if he wrestles and catches Gavin Suika. Now, let's not forget, Gavin Suika, you had talked about the importance of it advancing. There's nobody that knows that better than Gavin Suika, right? Because week in and week out last year in the postseason, with that broken foot, he was going out and getting as far as he had to, right, to advance on to the next week, ends up getting to the point where he medals in Hershey. So he's a textbook example, or the poster child of advancing, moving on.
Yeah, no doubt about it. He got to where he needed to, defaulted out of the tournament, got to the next week. In really last year, you could have said he would have won a WPIAL title, right? He was going in as the top seed in the WPIAL. But just couldn't, God did just enough to get to the semifinals to default out to advance on, and ended up getting him a state medal out of it. So, yeah, I'm excited to see how 133 shakes out. Should be some really good semifinal matches. And I'm surprised you didn't mention another McGuffey freshman, Victor Bonus, at this weight. He's going to be another guy battling it out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be too. People are going to start thinking that I'm getting paid by McGuffey. I mean, I've been accused of a lot worse than that. So I don't want to, Jared Robertson and I go way back, so I don't want to show any favoritism to an old friend of mine.
139 pounds, Joey Senapal of Burgestown, your top seed. Nico Farah of Pearl, number 2. Luke Hollywood of Avonworth, number 3. Owen Nissick of Bentworth, number 4. Greg Shawless of Mount Pleasant, number 5. Farah had a good tournament for Burrell. He won by 11-3 major decision over Aiden Burford of Highlands, and that put Burford down on the bottom half of the bracket.
Yeah, Farah was the one that I had, as the most notable result there, just because of the pure, domination that he showed. I thought Luke Hollywood looked good as well for Avonworth. Not a team that we're necessarily always talking about. Not the Mount Pleasants, not the Burrells. He certainly had a good tournament. This is Joey Senapal's weight, but it's not going to be easy for him. By any stretch. He's certainly the favorite. But look at the top half. You got Shawless as well. You have Owen Ivchik as well on the top half. Those aren't easy outs. Those aren't guys that are just going to lay over and roll over for you. The bottom half is what intrigues me because I think Fair is after this past weekend is the favorite. But Luke Hollywood, Aiden Burford, is he going to close the gap? Giovanni Waitman from Bell Vernon is a guy you don't want to sleep on, right? I'm pretty high on him and Bell Vernon coming down from AAA to AA. I don't think we've actually seen a lot of their guys compete against some of the folks that we're used to seeing them go against, right, because of that change in classification. But, Waitman's one I'm keeping an eye on as well.
Yeah, he had a loss to Senapal, the top seed, and then dropped a 6-5 decision to Shawless at Mount Pleasant. So we'll see how he battles here this week in an opportunity to try to advance on. 145 pounds, really one of those wide-open weight classes, Jeff. Logan Ritchie of Quaker Valley is the top seed. Jonah Erdley of Fraser, who's been impressive as a freshman, is the number 2. Tyler Debnar of Best Center coming in at number 3. Erdley had just had a big win over Debnar in the section finals, 1-0. And really, you look at the southern section at 145. It was pretty loaded when you look at the rest of the weights, right? I mean, you had Charles Crepaloro winning the eastern section. You had Logan Ritchie winning the northern, but honestly, that southern section has a number of good guys. From early Debnar, we got Gabe Kubkowski, who beat Eric Kovach. You got Cole Doppelauer of Bell Vernon, who was the number 2 seed going in. Grant Hathaway of Jefferson Morgan grabs that last spot. I'm interested to see how these southern guys kind of break the bracket a little bit here at 145.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the southern section was certainly the best section, right? It was definitely the deepest, and you're going to have that across the state when you look at these section tournaments. But this one to me, the guy who really has been catching my eye is Jonah Erdley. The kid's just been wrestling out of his mind. Has a win over Lonzy Velma of Connellsville, a guy who beat Logan Ritchie. That's why they're ranked in the state the way they are. Logan Ritchie is a state medalist, right? You're always going to be if you win your section and you're a state medalist, you're going to be the top seed regardless, right? I like Jonah Erdley on the bottom half coming out, but again, it's not going to be easy. You have Gabe Lilly from Beaver Falls. He is somebody that has to, claw and scrape to find matches because of wrestling for Beaver Falls. You have Eric Kovach as well from Burgettstown. I love that first round matchup with Kovach and Lilly. Gabe Kubaski from Southmoreland. He's a guy who their coaches have been talking about him for a very long time. They're all real high on him. He's had some really good results at the youth tournaments. He's finally coming into his own a little bit, and that showed finishing third in that really deep south section. Him and Debnar very well could have another match here in the quarterfinals. So, 45 is definitely one of my favorite weight classes. Cole Doppelhauer, talk about a guy who hasn't been on the mat a whole lot this year, but let's not forget, last year in AAA, he was a regional medalist. In AAA, as a freshman, a regional medalist, now comes back as a sophomore, has a very shortened season due to an injury. He could really upset some people here if he wrestles well and he's getting healthier.
Yeah, you look at just who would advance into the quarterfinals. You could say 5 of the 8 are going to come out of that one southern section because of how deep it was. Remember this too about Gabe Lilly. You mentioned him. He had an upset win last year over Nico Farah of Burrell
Mm-hmm.
in the opening round, the very opening round of the tournament.
Yep.
It was one of the biggest upsets in AA last year. So keep that in mind as you kind of look and see how he does here at 145. 152 pounds, Tyler Barish of Best Center, your top seed. Ryan Seleshi of Fraser, number 2. Isaiah Pisano of Hopewell, number 3. Rudy Brown of Burgestown, number 4. Another solid section out of the southern area as you had Barish beating Seleshi 6-5. Seleshi beat Brown 9-2 in order to get there. Brown beats Elijah Brown of Bell Vernon for third and fourth. So another deep section there. But you look at those guys. Is it Barish and Seleshi, or is Pisano a guy that can pull some upsets?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I'd call it an upset for Pisano. I mean, he's a really good wrestler. Barish is a stud. He's a guy who he's going to VMI. Just a really good senior season for him after playing football this year. He's gotten back into shape and has been wrestling really strong. And that match with Seleski, that was a big time matchup for him. That was something where you say, okay, like where am I at with a really hungry Ryan Seleski, who's a sophomore and trying to keep up with a guy like Rune Lawrence, right? It was a really good section in the South. I think if you look at the way the bracket is, it all is going to shake out pretty well. I think Rudy Brown's going to make it to the semis, and I think he's going to have Tyler Barish. I think Pisano and Seleshi will probably be there as well. I'm not looking past Elijah Brown from Bell Vernon, a really tough freshman, another guy that I know the coaches there are really excited about. Will Turner from Indiana, also a guy that should not be taken lightly either. So yeah, there's going to be some good matches here outside of those big guns like Barish and Seleshi. Rudy Brown's somebody I've been really, again, let's go back to the state tournament. I mean, he's had such a good February, this month. He's had such a good month this year. I really do think he's going to make some noise and potentially make it, far potentially into Hershey.
160 pounds, the top seed, Grant McKay of Laurel. Number 2 seed is Chase Brandenburg of Carlinton. And a 3 seed, Chase from Elliott Jefferson Morgan. Number 4, Jackson Angelo of Fraser.
Yeah, I mean, what's there to say about this weight? I mean, it's certainly highlighted by Grant McKay, right? State champion, state runner-up, going to Pitt. Clearly the guy that everyone's looking at to see where they're at. But we're finally going to see the Chases go head-to-head with Chase from Elliott and Chase Brandenburg from Carlinton and Jefferson Morgan, respectively. Really excited to see that one. Jackson Angelo, not saying he's going to upset Grant McKay. That's not. I don't want my words to be twisted. But Jackson Angelo is going to be a problem. I feel like a broken record talking about these young Fraser wrestlers, but what Buck Watkins and his staff are doing there. These guys are going to all the toughest tournaments. They're going to Ironman. They're going to Powerade. They're at a lot of these big time events. And it shows, right? Jackson Angelo, I think, is going to have himself a good tournament. And, Chuck Perkins could be there sitting, waiting for him. Nico Zanella as well from Burrow. I think he's going to have a good tournament. This is going to be everyone's going to talk about Graham McKay, but I think it's going to be interesting to see who the 2 through 8 are here at 160 pounds.
I think you really have a heavier set of your top 8 as well. You have McKay, and then you have that, okay, who's the 2-3? Brandenburg from Ellie. Angelo right there. He could get in that mix of 2-3 as well. But you kind of have a solid top 4. But then you really have that 5 through 8 as far as how they're going to place, between Perkins, Logan Noyes, Ryan Creedle, Nico Zanella. I mean, it seems like you kind of have a good, this is one of those weights where you feel pretty good about who your top 8 are. It's just a matter of who's going to, the champ, I feel like. How's 2 through 4 look, and then how's 5 through 8 look?
Yeah, that semifinal match between the Chases is just going to be epic. So their last 2 bouts, they've been 1-point matches. 9-8 this year at Burgettstown, 7-6 last year, and that was Formella last year, Brandenburg this year. 1-point matches. So that's one you've got to have circled. You got to watch that one. It's going to be a good one.
172 pounds, Braden Welsh of Fort Cherry, your top seed. Isaac Lasinski of Burrell, number 2. Jesse Orban of Chartiers Houston, number 3. And Tristan Ice of Southmoreland, number 4. Kyle Brookman of McGuffey, Jeff, number 5.
why are you shouting out like Kyle Brookman? Like, I'm the biggest McGuffey fan. Shout out Kyle Brookman, man. He had a good tournament. He's with 11 losses. He's had some really and McGuffey's same way. I mean, Jared Roberts gets those guys tested and gets them some really tough competition, going to a lot of big tournaments. But the thing at 172 is Braden Welsh has become, I feel like he's been around forever just because he is always wrestling. I swear he's wrestled in every single preseason event known to wrestling. He wrestled. I don't think he ever stopped from last year. He's only a sophomore, right? 32-3 on the season. I really do think this is a chance for him to really set himself apart because you have some really tough freshmen in Tristan Ice and Jesse Orban as well. Lasinski is again battle tested, right, for Burrell, but he's going to have his hands full in the bottom half. Conroy of Albert Gallatin down there as well. I think Orban is going to pose some challenges. But really, I think Welsh has got to be the one to say, all right, this is my weight. This is how much I'm going to beat the second by. But just like we've talked about in the previous weights, the 2 through 8 or the 3 through 8 here, it's really up for grabs. I really don't know how that's going to end up.
Yeah, you look at you're right. I mean, I think I'd like to see Welsh really distance himself from the rest of this weight class, and he has that opportunity to do so. But you're right. I mean, 3 through 8, I mean, I think is really anybody's game. I mean, Jesse Orban has kind of gotten, one of those guys who's taken those last couple of spots and advanced in the tournaments. As far as like getting to the regional tournament. Same with Tristan Ice. So they're not guys that are not unbeatable by any means. So it'd be interesting to see how 3 through 8 really looks. I do like Isaac Lasinski and his chances to get to the final against Welsh. But again, I'd like to see if Welsh is going to be that state medalist that he's hoping to be. You want to see him distance himself from the group. 189 pounds, Rune Lawrence of Fraser, your top seed. Tyler Bender of Highlands, number 2. Jake Lehue of Best Center, number 3. Chase Tinsman of Laurel, number 4.
So if you're looking at this weight, right, outside of Rune Lawrence, I really think you can say that they'll finish 2 through 8 in any order possible. I mean, there's really not a whole lot of, Tyler Bender, sure, yeah, he won the Eastern Regional over Tinsman, who's good, really good. But this is a wide open weight class outside of Rune. You know what I mean? It's Rune and then everybody else. Rune's going to get a first period fall all the way through. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. Lehue, he's kind of the best of the rest from the South section. He's had some good results this year, but I don't think he's a guy that's a locked in finalist here. Neither do I think that about Bender. Trent McRae from Freedom. We haven't really talked a lot about some of those Freedom guys, but he's one of those fringe guys that I think could cause some issues. Cam Martin from Burrell. If you win 25 matches for Burrell, you're doing something right. Cam Martin is certainly one of those guys that doesn't get talked about a whole lot, but he's certainly one that I'm keeping an eye on. Even James Standish from Albert Gallatin. I mean, he's not bad at all. So, this is an interesting weight outside of Rune because I really don't think that there's much you can't say with a lot of confidence. Yeah, this guy's 2, this guy's 3. You just can't do that based on the results that these guys have.
Yeah, no idea how it's going to shape out, right? I mean, I'm interested to see who ends up making it into the final from that bottom half. I like Lehue. I think he's got a good chance to get to the finals as the 3 seed. But you're right. I mean, you look at you think that out of 8 spots, Lehu's probably going to take one of those.
Yeah,
Bender's
I think he's going to
take one. Tinsman's going to take one. Cam Martin will probably take one. But
I don't know what order.
We don't know much about Slayton Williams. We don't know much about Trent McRae.
Well, I think you could see a Bender finishing 3rd, or you could see a Martin finishing 3rd, right? I mean, that's the point. Is Lehue, yeah, he'll find a way. It would have to be something really crazy for him not to get in the top 8, right? And a lot of those guys, I would say, yeah, they're locked in for the most part, but I just don't know how they're going to end up. I mean, I think you just throw them up in a bag and you see how they land outside of Rune. I just don't know.
215 pounds. Your top seed is Vitaly Daniels of Bentworth. Number 2 is Brennan Morgan of Central Valley. Number 3, Christian McChesney of Greensburg-Salem. And number 4, Dylan Pitzer of Mount Pleasant. Boy, this one's should be a really fun weight class to watch.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Lehue. Vitaly Daniels teched him at the first tournament of the weekend, beat him 15-0 in 4 minutes. Vitaly Daniels, when healthy, is one of the best there is. Vitaly Daniels has he struggled a little bit with some injuries, but he made the decision to go up from 189 to 215. And I don't think he's going to be disappointed with the results from that. He was a state qualifier last year, lost to Abe Keep, 8-6 in sudden victory. Abe Keep goes on to finish 4th in the state, lost to him in sudden victory. The only losses he had there were to the state runner-up, Brad Morrison, and to the state 4th, Abe Keep. So talk about a really crappy draw for him. Vitaly Daniels is certainly one that I think is a must. He's definitely the favorite here, in my opinion, despite coming up. But Brennan Morgan, I think, is going to have a lot to say about that. Dylan Pitzer, on the other hand, he has a loss to McChesney this year. But he's Dylan Pitzer, right? He's a Pitzer. He's certainly he's a guy who's not afraid to mix it up. Colin White from West Green as a freshman, 31-7. I was certainly surprised by how well he's been at 215 pounds as a freshman. Maybe West Green doesn't wrestle the toughest of schedules, but certainly White having 30+ wins going into the postseason. I was definitely impressed with that. I think we'll see a Brennan Morgan and Vitaly Daniels match here, but Pitzer, McChesney, Luke Boylan even, those guys aren't going to go quietly. And I'm excited to see this one, because really I think it's wide open, maybe outside those top 2. And I wouldn't say those top 2 are locks either, but I definitely think they're favorites.
I mean, I like the top 4 in this weight class. I think you're right in saying Daniels and Morgan are going to be the favorites going to get to the final. But I like McChesney and I like Pitzer too, and I think they're going to be a great matchup for 3rd, 4th if they can't pull off an upset in the semis. And then honestly, you look at the guys like Colin White, Luke Boylan, they feel like they're pretty solid as far as a 5-6. So maybe 7-8 might be up for grabs. But I tell you what, you have some studs here at 215 in the WPIAL. 285 pounds, your top seed is Colton Hill from Laurel. Your number 2 seed, Mason Niederheiser from Southmoreland. Number 3, Joey Baronic of Burgestown. Number 4, Christian Flaherty of Keystone Oaks. Baronic, returning WPIAL champion, was upset in the semifinals by Mason Niederheiser. He lost 5-4 in that match, and then he came back into the consolations and ended up forfeiting to Rosilko of Bentworth. So that's where the reason why you have Baronic where he is.
Yeah, I mean, are you done, Greg? You stopped very suddenly.
I was going to ask, we talked about how Fenella kind of lost his seed, right, to the 4 spot. Mm-hmm. But here you have Baronic, who forfeited to Rosilko, but he's seated ahead of him on this go-round.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at the body of work with Joey. I definitely don't think that I'm not mad at where he's at there. I think that's the right. I think that's the right call, and I know that seems hypocritical, but that's you got to look at the body of work. I don't think there was much of a, Bertucci and Fenella and Williams. Williams was a state qualifier in the same weight that Fenella was, so you're kind of splitting hairs there. Baronic he's on a different level, in my opinion, right? Colton Hill has been very, very solid and steady, but Niederheiser has had, he has 11 losses on the season, and he just went off at the sectional tournament. I mean, that was a huge performance for him. It really sucks that Joe Wilson is not going to be able to compete. This is a guy who, as a freshman for Washington, was kind of like their, their star. And it seems like that's the MO for Washington is having tough heavyweights, right?
Yep.
But Joe Wilson gets an injury and is unable to compete moving forward. But Niederheiser had a good win over Warnock, and then Wilson as well. So I would say 285 is still a little bit more wide open, right? Colton Hill is the favorite, right? But Flaherty, not a guy that I'm going to look past at all. Baronic as well. If he's healthy and he wrestles him the way he can find himself in the finals and winning it. I expect to see him and Niederheiser wrestle again in the semifinals. I think those two are the clear. I think you have a really clear top four here. Would you agree with that, Greg?
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. And it just depends on how they're going to finish as far as 1 through 4, because any given week they could finish in any order, right? So, you look at Baronic's health, I think, is first and foremost. If he can come bounce back from his loss against Niederheiser and get another WPIAL title, then he'll be well on his way as far as, advancing on to the next round. So, should be a lot of fun to see. A lot of good brackets, a lot of good matchups coming up here in AA. It's all going to be at Chartiers Valley High School this weekend. AAA gets underway on the section side. The East will be at Norwin, the North will be at North Allegheny, and the South will be at South Fayette. And Jeff, we'll just kind of start things off here in the in the Norwin section in the East. Any weight classes or any moves that you were surprised about in this section?
Yeah, I mean, can we first talk about how weird it is to have AAA sections, East, like geographic sections, North, South, and East? Like, I mean, that to me it's still kind of weird to me. Do you agree with that?
Well, and especially when some of them too, it may not really line up that way, right? I mean, I think it was the same way in AA. It was like, wait, how is that team in this section? But just kind of how it plays out.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like geography they don't always play a part in how these teams end up getting into where they are at. You had mentioned with the East, some things I'm looking forward to. Obviously, I'm looking forward to 114, Luke Wilshell and Tyler Kapusta. Those two have wrestled a number of times. They're really tough and they're really competitive. The other one I'm looking forward to is 121, Leo Joseph and Jake Layton. And I would say both those guys are looking to separate themselves from the rest of the field. I'm not going to look past Owen Carcilio as well from Hempfield area. I think he's really tough. And how healthy is Vinny Kokiri? Because let's not forget Evan Petrovich, when they wrestled, was it the team tournament or right before the team tournament? It was a kind of a close match, right? So to me, it's like, okay, is Vinny healthy, right? Is he going to be good to go? The East has a lot of the studs, a lot of the hammers, because you look at 133, Maddox Shaw, Ethan Lieben. I mean, this is a second and third in the state going head to head, right? I definitely think they're two of the top guys, not only in the WPIAL but the state. Maddox Shaw has just had a little bit of a better year thus far. But I'm looking to see how he is going to be against Ethan Lieben, a guy we saw down at 27 previously. So yeah, I mean, a lot of these weights intrigue me. At 139, I'm looking forward to seeing Eli Carr, Lonzy Vialma, Nate Stone, Gabe Conboy as well. I think they're going to be in the mix. Jack Duncan from Ringgold is also there. I think can cause some problems. So overall, there's some open weights. I'd say 45 is a little bit more wide open than most of the weight classes.
Let me stop you for a second, Jeff, because you missed one. 139. There's a 10 seed that just kind of sneaks in there. His name's Nate Roth.
Yeah, okay.
And he slides in there at number 10 seed because of his body of work, right? He hasn't gotten much on the mat, so he's 4-1 on the season. Is he healthy? And if so, I think 139 is that weight class that I have circled. Like, wow, how's this one going to shape up?
First of all, don't ever interrupt me again. Okay, that can't happen again. Second of all,
don't make a mistake.
I didn't make a mistake. I made an omission, because they seated him so terribly. Nate Roth is, yes, I apologize. I kind of was moving too quickly. I was looking at the time and thinking, we gotta speed it up a little bit. But the East is where we're gonna have a lot of our conversation because of the depth here with a Hempfield and Latrobe and Connellsville and those teams. But yeah, Nate Roth, he only has 5 matches on the year. And I think only like 3 of them were contested. I'll have to double check that, but I don't think he actually had more than 2 or 3 matches that are actually he wrestled. I think this was kind of the plan for Nate. It was to kind of stay in a bubble, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him potentially get to where he's going to advance and then maybe pull Gavin Suika. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think it could happen.
It's a shame we got to see him and Vilma in the quarters, though.
Yeah, you're right. I definitely think they did a disservice there, but I also understand the point of it too. Like you can't say because this guy 2 years ago was really tough, or because last year, he beat Briar Priest and you don't want to hold an injury against him, but I also get it. Like, Eli Carr is 30-5 and has been wrestling just, really, really well this year. I'm not taking away that top seed from him. He has a win over Lonzy Vielma. Vielma was a state qualifier. Nate Stone was never a state qualifier. Nate Roth was never a state qualifier. So I get it. I just think you probably didn't have to put him 10, right? Maybe not top 4, but why are we putting him 10?
Yeah, why is he not 5? Why is he not 6? I mean, I agree with you. That I'd be putting him somewhere in that 4, 5, 6 range. I guess unless you want to keep him away from top seed Eli Carr because he deserved that top seed. But I mean, you're kind of doing a disservice in a way to Lonzy Vilma of Connellsville.
Well, yeah, though. I agree. You're definitely doing a disservice to Lonzy. They wrestled last year, and Roth beat him 8-3. This year they were going to wrestle, but Vielma got the injury default win there. So, if I'm Lonzy Vielma, I'm kind of ticked off. I'm like, why are you feeding me Roth right out of the gate? A guy I lost to last year 8-3. Now, the question is, and it always has been, is Nate Roth healthy? Right? Because when he's healthy, he's one of the best. Right? His freshman year, when he got injured against Jace Ross from Collinsville, Jace Ross goes on to win a state medal. Nate Roth was beating Ross by, I think, like he was majoring him. I think.
Yeah, he was majoring him. Correct.
He would have been he would have been a state medalist his freshman year. I mean, everybody knows that, and if you don't admit that, you're a fool. He's just had the worst luck in terms of injuries, and you feel so awful for him. So you don't want to pull for a guy. But you're right. 39 here in the East section is going to be absolutely nuts. A Nate Stone or Gabe Conboy is sitting there thinking like, what benefits do I have of the 3rd and 4th seed if I'm going to get, one of these guys on the back end if I lose in the semi. So yeah, 39's, I admit I omitted it, but just be careful how you interrupt me.
Oh, wow. All right, boss. Wow, 145. You were starting to go on a tear of 145.
I don't know what I was just
rudely interrupted.
Rudely
with facts.
145 is wide open in my opinion. Jackson Huss, Cooper Dietz, Charlie Mesh as well, and Chad Jesko. Chad Jesko comes down from 52. He is a guy I'm certainly thinking that could potentially win it there. But, let's be honest. There's been some shuffling with Lucas Capusta going up from 45 to 52. Ethan Lieben going up to 33 from 27. Now, he was only at 27 for a very short period of time this season. But a Lucas Capusta-Bodie Marlowe match, I'm definitely there for that one. 52 got better because of Capusta coming up and Wyatt Schmucker coming down from 60, and then Ethan Ansel as well from Collinsville, a guy who I feel like's been around forever. He's so you got 4 really tough guys there with Capusta, Marlowe, Schmucker, and Ansel at 160 or 152. So I'm excited to see that one and how that plays out.
Absolutely, and then obviously some of the heavier weights should be fun as well as we look through the rest of those East brackets. Nothing really I don't think jumps out at you as far as the seeds as opposed to some of those early to the mid weights as far as that goes. When you look at the next section in the north, Jeff, and going to be wrestled at North Allegheny, you look at some of the weights here. Any ones in particular that when you go through, you just kind of have things jumping out at you?
Well, I mean, right off the bat, 107 is super deep. When you look at our regional rankings, which are the most accurate rankings there are on the face of the planet, there's a lot of depth here. You got guys like Logan Milligan from North Hills who's good, but earning not a top 4 seed. Landon Funk is there. Gus Stediford, who's had some really quality wins outside of the WPIAL this year. Owen Campbell from Plum, another guy who has been very impressive this year. Santino Sloboda is head and shoulders the guy here, right? I think most folks are saying he's definitely going to vie for a WPIAL championship and even a in the mix for a state championship. That's how good he is. But outside of him, you still have a lot of good wrestlers here. There's going to be some that aren't making it out, right? I look at Landon Funk and Gus Stediford and Owen Campbell. That's all those guys are toss-ups. Those all three of those guys can beat each other on any given day. So really 107 right off the bat, Greg, is what I'm looking at.
And then you got several other weights where you have a couple of studs here or there, but obviously there's a lot of weights here, Jeff. When I'm just going through and you kind of circle and highlight, it's like there's gonna be a lot of toss-up matches to get those 5-6 spots.
Yeah, I mean, I love this section because you have they're all very typical. They're all very similar. Plum, Butler, and Pine Richland. North Allegheny, Seneca Valley. You have these guys that are just, maybe they're not the Waynesburgs and the Canamacs and the Connellsvilles, but you have guys that are just grinders, like Will Bentram from North Allegheny, Griffin Reed from North Allegheny. These guys they've taken their lumps, man. But and same with Plum. Plum, I am so impressed with this year. They've been so solid throughout the entire season. Carson Yaka at 127. 127 is a really good weight with Tyler Chappell and Dom Ferraro from Pine Richland. Just looking at the matchups here, I don't see a lot of hey, this guy's definitely going to, dominate his way here. I think you're going to have a lot of good matches. Like 39, Nathan Monapart moves up from 33 to 39 to get away from some of that depth at 33. I'm curious to see how it pans out for him. When you see guys moving around, you think, okay, is this going to, was that a good decision? Like Austin Johnson going from 215 to heavyweight last year, you're like, oh, why would you do that? But, you never know. So I'm looking forward to this section because I think you're going to see a lot of guys, a lot of close matches, like 160 Levi Donnell and Adam Rohan. That should be a good one. Jacob Lucas as well in there. I'm excited to see some of these young guys like Mac Miller that we have talked about before. I'm really excited to see Antonio Walker from Plum, a guy who, him and Tyler Chappell, who Tyler Chappell's at 127, Antonio Walker is at 172. These guys wrestled 2 years ago during the COVID year, at 106 pounds, which is just crazy. Mark Gray and Antonio Walker potentially seeing each other again. Nez Green from Central Catholic, Matt Zinkman from Butler. So just a lot of weights that I look at, and I'm saying there's a lot of similarities between all these guys. We could see two really good young guys, Cooper Roskowski and Vaughn Spencer, go at it at 189 as well.
Slide over to the South section, and you talked about these teams aren't the Waynesburg and Canamac. Well, that's where you have the South section, Waynesburg, Canamac, and really you could throw Trinity into that mix.
And West Allegheny.
And West Allegheny as well. You're correct. Do you see them kind of dominating this section?
Oh yeah, I mean absolutely. Are you asking if I see Canamac, Waynesburg, and Trinity / West Allegheny?
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
for sure. But then you throw in. Peters Township has some guys that I'm big fans of. South Fayette, shout out South Fayette. That's your home district. You love them there. I think they're going to have some guys that are going to compete. They don't have Luke Dunlop there, so that hurts them a little bit. But yeah, this is going to be a Waynesburg, Canamac, domination here. I will say at 114, Kai Sheptick is finally wrestling like the Kai Sheptick we've expected, right? He's healthy. His lungs are back. He's going to have his hands full, though, here in this section, right? Cale Yannick from Moon, a guy who was a county runner-up. He recently had a win over Campbell from Plum. Him and Collier Hartman from Canamac is going to be a good opening round matchup. Fedorchak from Trinity, another young freshman here. Caden Halbert from West Allegheny is a junior who's had a lot of good experiences in his career. Damai goes up from 14 to 21, so that kind of clears out 14 a little bit. But what it does is makes 21 in this section one of the deepest in the tournament, because you have Brandon Damai, you have Cooper Smith from West Allegheny, who has wins over Jacob Lane and Brady Joling, but he has that loss to Owen Klodowski of Baldwin. So the top four here are really tough. Then you throw in Aiden Bench from Bethel Park as well. I'm really looking forward to that. And John Biano of South Fayette. So 121 is probably on paper the deepest weight class just in terms of amount of state-ranked guys. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of good ones. We got a potentially number 1 versus number 3 in the state with Rocco Welsh and Matt Furman as well at 172 pounds. So yeah, the South section, maybe it doesn't have the depth as the East because you maybe really only have 4 super teams here, but you still have there's going to be a lot of good weights here.
Yeah, 133, Mason Kernan and Darius McMillan and Nick Jones all residing there.
I was surprised Nick Jones came down from 39 to 33. Nick Jones has had himself a nice season, and it's hard for me to believe that he's only a junior. I feel like we've been talking about him for quite a while. But Nick Jones coming down from 39. McMillan is probably he's probably taller than him. McMillan's like 6'1" at 133, but Mason Kiernan, he had posted on social media his plan was going down to 27, right? Which makes sense. Look at what he did at Powerade at 127 pounds, beating out all those guys like Benny and Tyler Chappell. But his descent plan didn't allow him to get down to 129, so he had to come back up to 133. But I think he kind of took it on the chin and said, I'm just gonna be a state champion here at this weight instead. And you can't neglect the 160 pound bracket here with Sean Taylor and Dylan Evans, 1 and 2 in the state, going head to head for the 3rd time this year. That's obviously one you're going to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and could see that a couple of more times. And how about the other final right before that? We got Mac Church and Nico Taddy at 145. That should be a fun one too.
Yeah, I mean, my gosh, looking at the state rankings, these guys are all top 5 between Waters and Taddy as well, a guy who was a state medalist a few years back, and Sean and Dylan, obviously, and Rocco and Matt Furman. Like, it's very heavy at the top. Brody Evans, Gabe Stafford. I think you got like 3 or 4 just absolute studs, right? Eli Makel. I'm curious to see if Eli Makel can kind of separate himself a little bit here too. Gino Calgro from Canamac, he's been one of the most impressive wrestlers in the entire state, in my opinion. So, it's the South is going to have some fireworks, and you're going to have some guys that are meeting here in the South section that are very likely to wrestle on Saturday in Hershey at the state tournament. That's how impressive this section is.
Well, it should be a lot of fun to see how it breaks down and who we get the top 6 in the 3 sections as we get to move on to the AAA WPIAL tournament the following week. So we got a lot of good action coming up here this weekend, though. So if you have an opportunity, head out to Chartiers Valley for AA, or Norwin, North Allegheny, or South Fayette for AAA. And if you miss any of it, make sure you join us next week. We're going to recap it and get you set for the Southwest Regional in AA and the WPIAL tournament in AAA. And for my broadcast partner who hates to be interrupted, don't ever do it to him ever
Listen,
again.
we missed a week last week. I'm surprised you didn't get on my case about that, because I had to work and, so I'm sorry. Maybe I came at you a little hard.
I try to be respectful, the fact that you got your day job, this is just something we do.
It's a day job, but I work it at night, which is the problem. It's a day job that I work at night.
Well, you're interrupting my point is what I'm saying. You don't interrupt me either, Jeffrey. Come on, man. What I'm saying is this is something we do as an extra job. But we still have our 40-hour a week jobs, that we got a 40-hour plus week, right, that we put in. But glad we could get it on for you, and obviously we still have a couple more shows to go after this one, so
we got a lot,
still plenty more
for sure.
A lot of good wrestling to talk about. So for Jeff Upson, I'm Greg Warnock. Thanks for listening in and watching into WarUp on WPIAL.